A year of massive protests against police brutality and high-profile shootings of Black Americans has raised awareness around racial justice. That includes the call to do something, anything, about Confederate monuments, which is growing stronger across the country. Part of the recent government spending bill took out language to remove monuments from national parks. But cities, states, and counties have decided they're not going to wait on the feds. Joining us now to talk about this topic is Richmond City Councilman Michael Jones and history professor William Sturkey with the University of North Carolina. What's the rationale for Richmond to get rid of these monuments that have been up for decades in some cases?
Decades, close to 100 years. That's a little bit more than a decade, right? A few decades. It is what it is. They are symbols of racism. They are symbols and trinkets of white supremacy that have no place in a public setting. I believe when the individuals who laid out a plan for Monument Avenue and did even the real estate ventures along Monument Avenue, they were trying to send a message to the South, to African Americans. They were trying to make a statement that the South is still alive. The Confederacy, although it may have lost, it's still vibrant in the hearts of so many Southerners, that it is their heritage. It is a heritage of hate. It is a heritage of enslaved lives. And so we just thought it came to the point in time where they must come down. And that's what I fought for. That's what I've been advocating for since 2017.
Professor Sturkey, let me ask you a historical question here. I often hear from folks, sometimes even within the African-American community, who go, what's the big deal here? This doesn't change anything in the context of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or any substantive sort of policy change that benefits African-Americans. Why is it important then for these symbols to be taken down?
Look, the reason it's so important for these symbols to come down are conversations like the ones that we're having across this country about what the history of race in this country has been, about what symbols like the Confederate monuments mean, about, how these racial disparities were created in the first place. I think everybody wants to move on from this American cancer of racism that we've had in this country since its existence, since its founding. But, there are some people that just say, oh, you know what, let's just turn the page and forget about it. And then there are other people that want to have more of an honest reckoning, asking harder questions about how we got to this place. Because it's only in understanding how we got here that we can then understand how to build a better society. And these symbols that stare people in the face, that sit outside of courthouses, in places all across the South, they are preventing us from having these conversations. They were meant to, cover up certain truths about the history of slavery and about the history of the Confederacy. And I think they really retard our efforts to have a more honest reckoning about the history of race in America.
Do you think that part of this is not just the changing of taking down the Confederate symbols and statues, but reimagining from previous generations what emancipation and what that period was? And what I mean by that is that, look, minority groups, whether that's based upon race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, etc., they have a right to sort of look back at history and say, that's not really how we felt. Right? Why are statues like that even being thrown into the conversation? Should they be thrown into the conversation?
What do you tell a kid? What do you tell a little Black girl or a little Black boy when they see a Black man sitting on his knees in service to a white man, or when they see a Confederate monument, dedicated to this cause that was, a whites only nation that enslaved the Black race? It tells a young child that their society is not for them. And that's a great problem if you're 19 years old and you don't think you get to have a future in America, because America celebrates people who once enslaved people like you, or people who, your people were in service to.
If we're about dismantling systemic racism, then we must get at the symbols that point to something beyond itself, because that's all a symbol is. And so I don't want to see a freed slave, enslaved African kneeling, thanking the person for freeing them. No, I should be free in the first place. And so we all know the whole history of really why Lincoln freed the enslaved Africans and all those things, of that nature, because it still hasn't been the best thing for us, and that we're still fighting today. And so, they should come down. We should begin to rewrite the narrative. Heard a lot of African Americans, what does it mean to us? And I think we should tell them, just as, in the Hebraic days, what these stones mean. We should be able to tell them what these things mean and write and chart a new course.
You know, people ask, well, what harm do the monuments actually do? What's the point in taking them down? I think it's fair to ask the reverse question as well. Why do people fight so hard to keep them up? People didn't go to many of these monuments to lay flowers and to pray for the dead before. So why do you need them up? And I think it's useful here to think about who benefits politically from this being such a contested issue. And I think there's a group of people who benefit from another group of people worrying more about Confederate monuments than things like Medicaid expansion or, education or mass incarceration, right? Single issue voters who are concerned about Confederate heritage, white heritage, Confederate monuments tend to follow a certain party because that party benefits from them being single issue Confederate white heritage voters.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.